The sun was just beginning to rise over the rocky surface of Mirelon 7, a small barren moon far from Earth. It was cold, dusty, and quiet, a perfect place for something very unusual to happen. A group of young people, all wearing sleek training suits, were gathering near a cluster of metal buildings. These weren't just any group. They were human cadets, fresh faces from military schools here to take part in a training exercise unlike any other. The purpose was simple: learn to work with aliens, other species from far corners of the galaxy. This was part of a new effort to create peace and cooperation between different worlds, to help them fight bigger threats together if ever needed. The human cadets had heard stories about the other side, the alien team coming from the Galactic Dominion. The Galactic were reptilian in appearance, with rough scales, sharp eyes, and a reputation for being tough warriors. They were known to be proud and serious, and many thought humans were soft compared to them. But that didn't bother the cadets. They were ready to prove themselves. The training was supposed to be a simple game. Both sides had non-lethal weapons, nothing to cause real harm. The whole thing was carefully watched by officers from both teams, sitting high above in orbit on a space station, monitoring every move. The exercise was designed to test teamwork, strategy, and how well humans and aliens could communicate with one another during battle-like situations. It was a way to prepare everyone for real cooperation in the future. At first, everything seemed normal. The cadets moved through the rocky terrain, scanning the area and practicing formations. They chatted quietly, getting to know each other, nervous but excited. The alien group arrived with slow, careful steps. Their movements were precise, almost like a dance practiced many times before. But then something strange happened. Without warning, the Galactic suddenly launched a full attack. It wasn't the slow, staged moves the cadets expected. It was fast, sharp, and fierce. The aliens didn't fire blanks or non-lethal rounds. They acted as if this was a real battle, using every tactic they had to overpower the humans. The ground shook with the sound of their weapons, and the air filled with shouts and commands. The human cadets were caught off guard. Their hearts raced. They had trained hard, but nothing could prepare them for this kind of sudden, real pressure. The first few seconds were chaos. Some cadets fell behind, some tripped on the uneven ground. But then something remarkable happened. Instead of panicking, the young humans quickly adapted. One of them, who had been quietly observing until now, suddenly took charge. Without waiting for orders, this cadet told everyone to scatter and find cover. The group broke up into smaller teams, using the rocky hills and crevices to hide from the alien attackers. The cadets moved carefully, staying low and silent. They communicated using hand signals they had practiced many times before. The Galactic kept pushing forward, confident that their superior strength and numbers would win the day. But the humans surprised them. The cadets didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like people who refused to give up, who thought creatively and used every resource available. They set traps using training gear left behind, made distractions with emergency flares, and carefully planned ambushes. The alien attackers weren't used to this kind of resistance. They had expected easy victories, but what they found were opponents who refused to back down. The humans were clever and quick, using teamwork and courage to stay alive. The Galactic commanders began to realize this wasn't a simple exercise anymore. In the middle of all this, the cadets faced moments of real danger. One young human was nearly caught by an alien who moved with terrifying speed. Another had to drag a wounded teammate to safety. Yet no one gave up. The fear was there, but so was determination. They knew that even if they were outmatched in power, their strength lay in their spirit. Slowly, the tide started to turn. Using the natural landscape and their quick thinking, the humans found ways to slow down the alien advance. They hacked into the training system's computers to learn about the alien movements. One cadet found a way to jam the aliens' communication signals, causing confusion among the attackers. It was a mix of guts and smarts that kept them alive. As the hours passed, the human cadets learned something important. The Galactic thought this was a real fight. The aliens believed that the humans were trying to harm them, not just playing a game. That misunderstanding was dangerous, but it also explained why the aliens were so aggressive. They were acting on a mistaken belief, and that mistake had made the situation far more serious. Meanwhile, the officers watching from orbit began to notice the problem too. They sent urgent messages to stop the exercise to prevent anyone from getting hurt, but their warnings didn't reach the field. The cadets were caught in the middle of what had become a real conflict. Despite the pressure, the human cadets refused to surrender. They fought for each other, for their training, and for the chance to prove that humans could stand strong, even when the odds were against them. They learned that day how important it was to stay calm, to trust their teammates, and to never stop thinking. By the time night fell on Miralon 7, both sides were exhausted. The alien forces had taken unexpected losses, and the human cadets had survived through teamwork and courage. But the biggest surprise was still to come. What would happen next when both sides realized the truth behind this strange and dangerous game? The story of that day would soon spread across the galaxy, a tale of young humans who refused to back down, and of an alien force that never expected to face such fierce determination from their supposed soft opponents. What started as a routine training exercise had turned into something far bigger, something no one could have predicted. The moment the alien forces attacked with real force, everything changed. The human cadets, who had thought this was just a game, were suddenly thrown into a situation much more serious than they expected. The Galactic warriors moved quickly and with power. Their movements were sharp and precise, like trained hunters on the hunt. But the humans didn't run away or freeze. Instead, they used what they had learned in their training, and more importantly, their own courage. The first few seconds were chaos. The humans scattered, trying to find safe places behind rocks or small hills. Their hearts pounded fast, their breaths came quick. Many had never faced anything like this before. Some were shaking, scared, and unsure, but others were calm, their minds focused on what to do next. The difference between fear and courage was clear in every face. One cadet who had been quiet and thoughtful suddenly took the lead. Without waiting for orders, they began to give quick, clear signals to the others. "Split up," the signal said. "Find cover. Watch your backs." The others followed, moving with a new sense of purpose. It was not just about surviving now. It was about fighting smart. The Galactic pushed forward, their weapons flashing. They expected the humans to break quickly, to run away or surrender. But the humans surprised them. Instead of meeting force with force, the cadets used their minds. They looked for weaknesses in the alien advance and used their environment to their advantage. Rocks, shadows, even discarded training equipment became tools. The aliens were strong, but the humans were clever. They set traps with nets made from training gear, threw flares to confuse their opponents, and moved silently to outflank the attackers. These were not professional soldiers, but young people, some barely out of childhood, doing what they could to survive and fight back. Their determination was clear. They were not going to give up. Amidst all this, there were moments of real danger. One cadet was almost caught by a Galactic warrior, who moved faster than anyone had expected. Another was injured but kept going, helped by friends who refused to leave anyone behind. The fear was real, but so was the will to keep going. One group of cadets managed to corner a Galactic commander. They didn't have weapons strong enough to harm him, but they trapped him with a net made from emergency ration straps. It was a strange sight. A powerful alien warrior held by young humans using simple tools. The commander struggled, but the cadets held firm. Meanwhile, the human team started to learn more about the alien tactics. They realized the Galactic were not just attacking blindly. They had plans, they communicated with each other, and they were disciplined. But the humans found ways to interrupt that communication. One cadet, skilled with computers, hacked into the training system. They found ways to jam the Galactic's radios, causing confusion among the aliens. The alien warriors began to grow frustrated. They had expected an easy victory, but were met with resistance that was fierce and unpredictable. The humans' unexpected cleverness and bravery threw off their plans. For the first time, the Galactic commanders began to wonder if they had underestimated these young humans. The cadets worked together closely, sharing information and helping each other. Their training kicked in, but so did something deeper, a bond formed through shared struggle. They knew that they were not just fighting for themselves, but for each other. That connection gave them strength. Time passed slowly. The sun moved across the sky, and the heat of the day pressed down on the fighters. Both sides were tired, but the humans stayed alert. They knew they couldn't let their guard down, not even for a moment. Far above, the commanders watching from orbit started to realize something was very wrong. They sent messages to stop the exercise immediately, but the human cadets were deep in the middle of the fight, and their communication systems were jammed. No one on the ground knew these orders. The simulation had turned into something real, something dangerous. Despite the pressure, the human cadets didn't lose hope. They kept fighting with everything they had, wits, courage, and heart. They learned quickly, using every chance to turn the tide against the aliens. As the day turned to evening, the cadets found themselves in small groups, scattered across the rocky land. They moved quietly, keeping track of each other with hand signals and quiet words. They shared water and bandaged wounds, encouraging one another to keep going. It was a hard, exhausting battle. But with every move, the humans grew stronger in their belief that they could survive and even win. They had started the day as students, unsure and nervous, but now they were fighters. Not because of weapons or technology, but because of their spirit. At one point, a cadet spotted a weak point in the alien formation. They quickly gathered a small team and set a clever trap, using the natural caves nearby. When the Galactic warriors walked into it, they found themselves caught and confused. This moment gave the humans a much-needed advantage. The Galactic commanders began to see that these humans were not the easy opponents they had thought. They were learning, adapting, and never giving up. For the first time, the aliens faced fear, not from their enemies, but from the unknown strength of human will. As the first stars appeared in the sky, the battle continued, but the humans held their ground. They had lost some, but many more stood ready to fight another day. They were tired, bruised, but proud. They had faced an enemy they did not expect and had survived. No one knew what the next day would bring, but the young cadets had already proven something important. They were not just learners. They were warriors in their own right. And that truth would change everything. As the battle stretched into its second day, the human cadets found themselves facing challenges unlike anything they had trained for. The Galactic warriors were relentless. Their strength and experience were clear, and the humans were constantly on the move, avoiding direct fights when possible. But despite the exhaustion, the cadets refused to give up. One of the biggest problems the cadets faced was their lack of proper weapons. The Galactic fought with weapons designed to incapacitate opponents quickly, even if non-lethal in this exercise, and their size and armor made them hard to approach. The humans, on the other hand, were equipped with training gear, scanners, and a few simple tools, but nothing powerful enough to face the Galactic directly. But the cadets did what humans do best. They used their creativity. In quiet moments between skirmishes, they began to improvise. They made traps from the things around them, nets from spare cords, tripwires from emergency ropes, and smoke bombs from training flares mixed with dust from the rocky ground. These simple inventions became their weapons. One cadet, who had a sharp mind for machines, figured out how to use parts of their scanners to send out false signals. These signals made it seem like there were many more humans in places where there were none. The Galactic began to hesitate, unsure where the real threats were. Another cadet worked on hacking into the simulation's AI system. This was risky because the AI controlled many of the environmental controls, but with careful work, the cadet managed to access the map data and learn where the alien units were positioned. This information was shared quietly among the groups, helping them avoid dangerous areas and plan their movements. The humans used every chance to rest and recover. Even when they were tired and injured, they helped each other. No one was left behind. One of the cadets, although injured, refused to stop moving, encouraging the others with quiet determination. This spirit inspired everyone to keep going, no matter how hard the fight became. On the other side, the Galactic commanders were growing frustrated. Their attacks were meeting unexpected resistance, and their soldiers were tired. They didn't understand why humans could fight so fiercely with so little. To them, humans had seemed unpredictable and weak in past encounters. But here, on this rocky moon, the cadets were proving something else. A turning point came when the cadets managed to capture one of the Galactic's communication devices during a quick skirmish. This allowed the human cyber specialist to intercept alien messages. Slowly, they uncovered a secret. The Galactic believed this was a real battle, not a training exercise. Their aggression wasn't a mistake. It was based on fear and misunderstanding. This discovery changed everything. The humans realized the Galactic weren't their enemies. They were victims of a broken system, caught in a dangerous mistake. It gave the cadets new purpose, not just to survive, but to find a way to stop the fighting. But stopping the Galactic was not easy. Their discipline and training kept them pushing forward. Still, the human cadets were clever. Using the knowledge from intercepted messages, they set up clever ambushes and traps. One group used caves to create false sounds, making the Gralnak believe they were surrounded by a much larger force. That tactic worked better than anyone expected. The Gralnak warriors hesitated, confused by the illusions. It gave the cadets time to regroup and tend to their wounds. They shared stories quietly in the dark, comforting each other with words of hope. The night was cold, but the warmth of their teamwork kept them going. The cadets began to understand that this fight was no longer about winning or losing. It was about proving who they were. They were more than just students or soldiers. They were survivors. As the stars shone above Mirelon 7, the humans and aliens continued their silent battle. But somewhere in the quiet moments between fights, respect began to grow. The Gralnak started to see the humans as something more than just weak opponents. They saw their courage, their creativity, and their unyielding will to fight for what they believed in. The cadets knew this was just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, to find a way to end the conflict without more bloodshed. But for now, they were ready to face whatever came next. Together, up in orbit, far above the rocky surface of Mirelon 7, the commanders who had been watching the training exercise grew more and more worried. They had thought everything was going smoothly, just a routine drill to test the skills of the new cadets. But now, what they were seeing was something else entirely. The alien force, the Gralnak warriors, were fighting like it was a real war. And the human cadets were not just defending, they were pushing back harder than expected. The commanders quickly checked the data and communications coming from the field. Then they discovered the truth. There had been a serious mistake. The instructions sent to the Gralnak had been mixed up. Their systems thought the exercise was a live combat situation, not a practice run. Their weapons had been set to real attack mode. The Gralnak believed this was a fight for survival, not a game. The commanders sent urgent messages to stop the exercise immediately. They tried to reach the cadets and the Gralnak warriors on the ground, ordering them to stand down. But the human cadets, busy in the thick of battle, had their communications jammed by the very interference they had created to confuse the aliens. The Gralnak, too, were too focused on the fight to notice the orders from orbit. The commanders had a tough choice. Should they risk sending troops down to stop the battle, possibly putting more people in danger? Or should they let it continue, watching closely, hoping it would end without serious injury? Some commanders argued that this was an opportunity. What if the humans could actually win against the feared Gralnak warriors? What if this was proof that humanity was stronger and smarter than many thought? Others warned that this was dangerous. The cadets were still students, not hardened soldiers, and the aliens were fierce fighters. The situation could spiral out of control. Back on the ground, the human cadets didn't know about these debates happening far above. They were focused on survival and trying to figure out the best way to end the fight. They had discovered the Gralnak's mistake through intercepted communications. Now they wanted to find a way to let the aliens know it was all a misunderstanding. But sending messages wasn't easy. The aliens were suspicious, their minds set on attack. Any sign of weakness could be taken as a chance to strike. The cadets knew that words alone wouldn't stop the fighting. They had to show strength and make the aliens listen. They decided on a risky plan. Instead of hiding or running, they would create a strong, visible signal of peace. Using their limited supplies, they gathered materials to make a large, clear sign on the ground, something that the aliens might recognize as a call to stop. It wasn't easy to make it big enough or clear enough to be seen from a distance, but they worked together, day and night. While they worked on the sign, the fighting didn't stop. There were still small battles, skirmishes in the hills and rocky crevices. The humans had to stay alert, always ready to defend themselves. Their exhaustion was growing, but so was their determination. One cadet, always calm under pressure, took the lead in organizing the teams. They made sure everyone had enough water and rest when possible, that the injured were cared for, and that morale stayed high. Sometimes they would quietly remind the group why they were fighting, not to defeat aliens, but to survive, to prove something about themselves. As the sign neared completion, the cadets sent out small teams to get closer to the Gralnak, hoping to show the sign and communicate their message. These teams moved carefully, using the tricks and skills they had learned. Some of the aliens noticed and stopped fighting briefly, confused by the sudden calm. It was a tense moment. The cadets held their breath, waiting to see if the message would be understood. Slowly, some Gralnak warriors backed away, signaling their willingness to talk. The fighting slowed down, and for the first time in days there was a pause. This pause was fragile but important. The commanders in orbit watched carefully, ready to intervene if needed. Down on the ground, the human cadets and the Gralnak began to talk, not with weapons, but through gestures, signals, and the few words they could share. They realized that both sides had been victims of a terrible mistake. Neither wanted this fight. The cadets saw that the Gralnak were proud and serious warriors, but also capable of respect and understanding. The aliens began to see that humans were not weak or soft, but strong and clever. That night, as the two groups camped apart but watched each other quietly, a new feeling grew, a feeling of respect and hope. The battle might have started by mistake, but it could end with a lesson. The young humans had shown bravery and quick thinking. The aliens had shown strength and honor. Neither side wanted more bloodshed. Both wanted to find a way forward together. The commanders in orbit agreed. They would officially call off the exercise and begin work on better communication protocols to avoid such dangerous misunderstandings. In the future, the human cadets looked at the stars that night and knew they had been part of something bigger than themselves. They had faced fear and danger, but also learned about trust and courage. They weren't just students anymore. They were warriors, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of a new kind of peace. After the tense silence that followed the accidental battle, both sides began to realize that the fight had to end. The human cadets and the Gralnak warriors were tired, hurt, and ready for peace. But peace was not something that came easily. There were many questions left to answer and wounds to heal. The human cadets spent the next day working closely with the Gralnak. They shared water and food, helped treat minor injuries, and exchanged gestures of goodwill. It was a strange feeling. After fighting fiercely, now they were talking quietly, learning about each other. The humans discovered that the Gralnak had their own fears and hopes, just like them. One of the cadets who had been quiet during the battle found a way to explain things to the Gralnak using simple symbols and drawings. They showed pictures of their home planet, their families, and what they hoped for the future. The Gralnak, in return, shared stories through gestures and sounds, telling of their own lives far from this rocky moon. Slowly, the gap between the two sides began to close. The cadets understood that the Gralnak were not so different from them after all. They had been taught to fight and defend, just as humans were. Both sides wanted safety, respect, and the chance to live without fear. In orbit, the commanders who had been watching the events unfold were relieved. They decided to send a small team down to Miralon 7 to help manage the situation and make sure no more misunderstandings could happen. This team included diplomats, medics, and communication experts. When the team arrived, the human cadets greeted them warmly. They explained what had happened and how they had worked with the Gralnak to stop the fighting. The diplomats began to talk with the alien commanders, helping to build trust between the two forces. The cadets were praised for their courage and quick thinking. They had not only survived a dangerous situation, but had shown what humanity was truly capable of: strength, compassion, and the will to find peace even when things seemed hopeless. Back on the rocky surface, the humans and aliens helped each other pack up their equipment. The Gralnak commanders thanked the cadets for their bravery and honesty. There was a quiet promise in the air, a promise to work together, to learn from each other, and to avoid the mistakes that had nearly caused disaster. The human cadets knew their training was far from over. This experience had been more than a test. It had been a lesson in what it meant to be part of a larger universe. They had learned that courage was not just about fighting, but also about understanding and forgiveness. As the ships prepared to leave Miralon 7, the cadets looked up at the stars. They thought about the battles they had fought and the friendships they had begun. They felt a new kind of pride, not just in their skills, but in their hearts. This day would be remembered as the moment when two very different forces found common ground. It was the start of something new, a chance for humans and aliens to work side by side, not as enemies but as allies. And for the young cadets, it was the moment they truly became warriors, not just of battle but of peace. After the ships left Miralon 7, the young cadets returned to their training base, but everything had changed. They were no longer just students learning the rules of war. They had lived through something real, something that tested their minds and hearts in ways no training could prepare them for. They carried with them the memories of the battle, the fear, the courage, and the hope that had grown in the face of conflict. Back at the base, the atmosphere was different. The other cadets who had not been part of the fight listened with wide eyes as the returning group shared their story. The commanders held meetings to learn from the experience, making plans to improve training and communication. No longer would such a dangerous mistake happen again. The young cadets who had been at Mirelon 7 found themselves changed. Some of them struggled with the memories of battle, the sounds of weapons firing, the sight of injured friends, the moments when fear threatened to take over. But they also carried a new strength. They knew what it meant to stand firm, to think quickly, and to lead others when it mattered most. Counselors were brought in to help the cadets talk about what they had been through. They learned that being brave didn't mean never feeling scared. It meant feeling fear and still choosing to act. Sharing their experiences helped them heal and grow closer as a team. The story of the accidental battle spread beyond the base. People across the planets watched the news, amazed at how young humans had faced down a powerful alien force and found a way to stop the fight with courage and kindness. It was a story that reminded everyone that even in a universe full of unknown dangers, hope and understanding could shine through. The Gralnak, too, told their own stories back on their home worlds. They spoke of the humans' courage and the strange new respect that had grown between the two species. Leaders on both sides began to discuss how to build peace, how to work together rather than fight. The battle on Mirelon 7 had become a turning point. For the cadets, life went on. Training continued, but with new lessons. Lessons about communication, teamwork, and the importance of listening as much as fighting. They learned to trust not only their weapons, but their minds and their hearts. Some of the cadets dreamed of becoming diplomats or leaders who could prevent wars before they started. Others wanted to be explorers, traveling the stars with a deeper understanding of the beings they might meet. But all of them knew one thing for sure: they were part of something bigger than themselves. Years later, when these cadets became leaders, soldiers, and teachers, they would remember Mirelon 7 as the place where they learned the true meaning of courage. Not just the courage to fight, but the courage to seek peace. Their story became a symbol, a story told to new generations of cadets to inspire them to be brave, to think clearly, and to believe that even the most difficult conflicts could be solved with respect and understanding. In the end, the accidental battle was more than just a mistake. It was a beginning of new friendships, new hope, and a future where humans and aliens could stand together, not as enemies but as allies in the vastness of space. And that future, born from courage and kindness, was the greatest victory of all.